Welcome to the Coding Loft. In today's video, we will look at how to build a beautiful slider with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript using a little plugin called Swiper.js. And this plugin helps you to create beautiful, mobile-friendly, touch-friendly sliders that you can pretty much customize to do whatever you want. So what you can see right here is that we always have a main slide in the middle, which is a little larger. We have text on top and a gradient in the background. And then I can drag and drop either on a computer or on the phone. And it goes in either direction. And it looks beautiful. And the same is true for the pagination. I can also use the pagination buttons to do the same thing. Okay? Then, if you're ready to get started, let's jump right in. Okay, so let's start. We do have our project folder opened up in VS Code. As you can see here on the left, I have 3 files, index.html with a very simple basic layout, script.js and style.css. And I also have a folder called image, and if I open it, I have 5 different images that I got from unsplash.com. You can use these images, I got a link in the description, or you choose your own images, whatever you prefer. But what we're going to do, we will work with Swiper.js. Now, Swiper.js is a super handy tool for free that you can use to create beautiful swipers that are mobile friendly, touch friendly. You can customize them very easily. And all you got to do is, once you're on this page, swiper.js.com, you can click right here on Get Started. And it tells you you can install it either from npm, or you can use a CDN, so a content delivery network, which is what we're gonna do. And it tells you exactly what you have to do. So you have to include a link to a style sheet. You will add that to the top of your project. So let's do that. Right, so in the head, just above our style sheet, I will add the Swiper.js style sheet. And then at the bottom, right above our script, I will add the Swiper.js script. And then if you scroll down, you can see that it shows you a very basic HTML layout that you can use. So what you can see here is it's very important to use specific class names, because Swiper.js styles these classes and knows how to make these interactive based on the names. So you don't want to change these. If you want to add specific class names, just add additional class names. But we're gonna just copy this right now and add it into our body. So right now, as you can see on the right, it doesn't really show much, which is to be expected because we haven't put anything in there yet. One thing I want to do is I want to create a general div that holds the whole swiper and the heading. So what we will do is we create a div with the ID of my swiper, and then we paste all of that code in there. And then on top we add a heading that says our tours. And right below I want to separate it with a line from the rest of the sliders. I will create a class that's called divider. And I think we're good to get started with the basic HTML layout. So instead of slide 1 right here, what we're gonna have is we're gonna have an image. And that image right now will be in our image folder, image1. And just below that, we have a div with the class of swiper text box, because we want to display some text on the image and we want to have text of different sizes. So I add that into a div here. Inside the div, we have a paragraph with the class of swiper text large, which will be sort of our heading. Let's say for now our tours. And just below that, we have another paragraph with the class of swiper text small, where we have a short description. Right now I'll just write explore the hidden gems of nature. So on the right, we now have the image. It's pretty large, but we will change that in a second. That's the main layout for this first swiper slide. So we will copy it and copy it 4 times. Get rid of the dots here. And then on VS Code, what you can do is you can select a certain area that you want to copy multiple times, and then you hold Shift and Option at the same time, and you press the down key. Now we have 5 different slides. We just changed the number of the images. Oops, I made a mistake up there. We have 3 here. And as you can see right now, it doesn't really show much because it already applies the CSS from the swiper.js file. So just to show you that it does have an effect already, is I commented out. And then you see here are the images, right? It's just stacked on top of each other, everything. Now down here, these are optional, and it depends if you want to add pagination. We're going to use the navigation buttons today. So we'll delete pagination and we delete the scroll bar. Okay, so let's start with the CSS before we start to actually work with the swiper. I have some basic CSS styles here already. So padding of 0, margin of 0, font family of Montserrat from Google Fonts. So you can simply change this right here, tab in a different family if you want. But I will stay with Montserrat today. And then here in the body, I have display at flex direction column. That means that there's a flex display and everything is stacked on top of each other. You will see later how that works in another example. And font family is Montserrat. The color of the text is this light gray, which is why you don't see much of the text. You don't see it anyway right now, but you will see it later. And width is 100 viewport width and height 100 viewport height. Background color is simply white. I usually like to go down from the structure of the HTML, looking first at my swiper heading, and so on. But I don't really enjoy it when the images are so large. So in this case, I will now start with images and the swiper slide. So now we'll start with the images and the swiper slide. So the swiper slide, remember, that's this div right here that holds the image in the text box. So the swiper slide, we want it to be positioned relative, because later we will position the text box absolute inside of it. Max width of 400 pixel. And now you can see it already changes the size. Now you can see the text better here. Our tours explore the hidden gems of nature. But the image is still way too large. Height auto. Overflow hidden. This one is very important. I'll show you later why. You can see it already right now. So we have a max width, and now the image doesn't go outside of that swiper slide. It just stays inside, and everything that's outside of 400 pixels just gets cut off, right? So now it kind of makes more sense already. Okay, but why is the image so large now? That's because the overall container, which is in our case the swiper and swiper wrapper, they're not defined yet. So let's do that. So they all live in the site is my swiper div that we created in the beginning, which wraps around everything. So let's define that, my swiper. And in here we will have a height of 75 viewport height. Now you can start to see our tours with the first slide and so on, as well as a width of 100 viewport width and a padding of 50. This is relevant later, you will see why. Display flex direction column, because we have multiple items inside this my swiper div and we want to center it. That's what this display flex and flex direction column is really useful for. So when we put align items center, it always pushes them right to the center, which looks way better, right? And then justify content center as well. Now that's the overall div. And inside of it, we have the swiper, which we want to position relative. and give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. And a padding top and bottom of 50 pixels and 0 left and right. Right now it still looks very weird, right? So let's go back to the HTML, and when we uncomment this link, so we have the link included. It still looks a bit weird, but when we make it large, what you can see right now is it kind of looks like a swiper, right? It doesn't have any functionality yet. The buttons do not work because we haven't added a JavaScript, but it's starting to get there. So let's start to actually add the JavaScript now, leave it a little ugly as it is right here, and then we continue with the rest of the swiper once the functionality is in there. So inside the script.js, what we're going to do is we create a new constant called swiper equals new swiper. And it takes in 2 arguments basically. So the first one is, where is it looking for that swiper? And it is called swiper. I will show you. And then it is looking for some options. So inside here, the div mySwiper is the overall swiper, right? Where we have the heading inside and this divider class. And then here's where the swiper actually starts. So the logic then from the JavaScript has to do with this swiper, swiper wrapper, swiper slide. So we have the class of swiper, and in here we can now define some options. So let's first look if that has already changed anything. Has this changed anything yet? Not really, but you can see we can now move it slightly. So this is definitely an improvement. So we will add slides per view auto, space between 40, centered slides true, grab cursor true, loop true, and preload images also true. So this already does a couple of things, as you can see. So I had a typo here, sorry about that. So slides per view, it basically shows you how many slides will you see. Auto is just what we're going to put right now. You can also predefine a specific number right here. Space between, that's the space between the slides. Centered slides, well, as the name says, that the slides are centered in the middle of the page. Grab cursor, that when you click here, you see this grab cursor. So it shows you that you can drag it from left and right. Loop, true, that's very important because that basically means that when you drag, you have this constant loop. So it re-shows you the images from before again and again. But as you can see, these buttons here, they don't really work yet. I can only drag and drop. So how can we do this? It's actually very simple. And you can see all of this in the documentation. It's very detailed. You go down here, you go to API, and then you pretty much have all of these different topics right here, and you can just scroll through them. It has tons of options. So for instance, it shows you right here, constant swiper, new swiper, a speed for 100, at the speed at which it should auto loop, the space between 100, and so on. And then once you go down, you see all of the different parameters that you can use, also examples for it. So it's very, very detailed. And if you want to find any specific effect or any parameter that you want to change, you can simply look here and find it. So we want to look for navigation, right? So in the modules here, navigation, you can see it shows you right here. So you have to define a navigation object, and in here you have several parameters that you can set. So next element, previous element basically says which is the button where you can press for the next or the previous slides. It's very self-explanatory. So we're just going to copy that inside of our JS code. Okay, let's see if it works now. So I can click it, as you can see, and now it moves simply by adding this text right here. And the reason why, of course, this is important, it tells the program where to look for this next element, right? And it should be a class that has .swiper button next, which is down here. We have this div of swiper button pref and swiper button next. Okay, so now we have the basic functionality. So I would say it's time to go back to our swiper and work on the styling so it doesn't look as hideous as it does look right now. So the image, let's continue working with that. Swiper slide image, and then width of 100%. Oops, I misspelled that. For some reason, I sometimes have this, that it makes a certain breakpoint, and I don't know why. So when it happens in your code, simply delete it. Object fit cover. So now this looks way better, doesn't it? So for instance, if I take these two out, we're back to 0, right? Now let's continue with the swiper slide. I told you that overflow hidden is important, right? Because it basically says that when we set a border radius, as we will do right now, which is a border radius simply of 10 pixels, the image will be contained within this border radius. If I take this out, it won't. You see? Great, so that starts to look like something, and then we give it some box shadow, so that's simply 0, 5 pixels, 10 pixels, and 0, and then with an RGB color of 0, 0, 0, and we have an opacity of 0.2. So we have a very light box shadow. Okay, let's work with the heading right now, because the heading is kind of not very visible, right? So the heading is on top of the swiper in our HTML. So I will go for a swiper heading. And all we want to do is give it a different color. So in this case, a gray that's a bit darker, as you can see here. And then we want to push everything a bit to the bottom. So margin bottom 40 pixels. And text align center. But this is not as important because it's already centered, but why not? And right below you have this divider class, which we don't see yet, but it's basically a thin line that kind of looks nice. So the width will be 30%. We have a max width of, let's say, 250 pixels, a height of 2.5 pixels, and that's where we will start to see it. Give me a second. So when we add a background color to it of a certain light gray, let's say F1, 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 there it shows, right? So now we have a background and height is 2.5 pixels. We can make this 5 pixels, then it gets bigger. It really depends on your preference. Let's give it a border radius 20 pixels. You don't really see it. It's very, very tiny, this effect. And we want a margin bottom of 50 pixels because that will push the slides a bit down. As you can see, great. And now there's one really cool thing that we can do with this swiper.js thing. If we look at the code, at this one right here, you can see that this slider has a class of swiper slide active. And it basically means that it has a different class than these, and we can use that because usually it looks quite nice when the main slide is a little larger than the other ones. So let's use the swiper slide active class. Active. And all we're going to do is we're going to transform scale 1.05. Now, what this will do, you know, it makes it a little bigger than the other ones. And when we change the active slide, then the middle one will always be the bigger one, which is kind of like a cool effect, right? Okay, but we do have a lot of text still and we don't see it anywhere. So let's work on that right now. We have a class called swiper textbox. And this, this swiper text box, this is where we're going to position absolute, which you don't see yet. because we have to define where we want to position it. So we want to position it at the bottom in our case. And now you can see the text, right? And to the left of. And then we can increase the text a little. So we have called this swiper text small and swiper text large. Start with the small one. And large. Now for the large one, let's give it a larger font size, obviously maybe 32 pixels. And there it is. As well as margin bottom of 12 pixels, and that will push it up a little from the text below. And the same with the small text, so we got a font size of 20 pixels and margin bottom of 12 pixels too. Right, so everything is now pushed to the top. So everything is now pushed downwards. But as you can see, it doesn't look nice that the text is kind of like glued to the left. We could do it here by adding a margin, but then it has the problem that we push the text to the right, but it kind of goes to this side, which doesn't look nice. So how can we do that? We simply add a padding to the text box, and we don't need a padding top and down. Yeah, we do need a padding top and down as well. So there you go. It now is this 20 pixel padding everywhere. So our slider starts to look pretty nice, right? But there are a couple of things left. So one thing that we want to do is that we will add a sort of overlay behind the text. And the way we do this is that we use the before pseudo class. So right here, swiper slide before. What this will do is it will create an element inside the HTML, and you have to put content basically empty. That's just how it is, and then position it absolute. Now the problem is, of course, we don't see anything yet, but bear with me. Width 100% and height of 100%. Now comes the effect, because now we will add a background, a linear gradient. And this will be 0 degrees, so that basically says the direction where we come from. RGBA, so black is 0, 0, 0 with an opacity of 0.9. Starting at 0% right here. This goes into RGBA 255, 255, 255. Zero 40%. Now we're almost ready, as you can see. Everything works. We have a gradient, we have the text. The only thing I don't like is this native swiper pagination element that it has right here, this blue color. It doesn't really look that nice. So that's the last thing that we're going to work on. But how do you actually do that? Again, we inspect the page element, and then you can see that it has a specific class, swiper button pref, which is also what we saw here in the JavaScript, right? So what we're going to do now is swiper button pref and swiper button next. Give it a margin of 50 pixels. Color of dark gray, a background of like this. And what will happen now? Yes, as you can see now it has this background and we want that to be round. So how we're going to do that? We set a certain width, which has to be the same as the height. And then we will simply add a border radius of 50%. Cool. Now lastly, in a box shadow to kind of separate it from the images below. and a 0.2 opacity. Now lastly, because you can see this right here. Now what's funny about this is that the size of this arrow is not in the class swiper button pref. But if we look inside here, there's an after pseudo class, and that's what has the size, right? So we will now select that. I simply copy these here. And then what we will do is we get the after class. And then we simply change the font size. And boom. And there you have your beautiful JavaScript swiper. Now you can leave it like that, or what you can also do, you can add some breakpoints, because as you can see right now, it always kind of shows the same amount of slides in the swiper. And then when you make it smaller, it doesn't really change in a way that now it just got rid of the other ones from the outside, right? So there's a really cool feature inside Swiper.js, which is called breakpoints. So all we have to do is we have to go here and we have to define these breakpoints. So the way that it works is that you define a certain screen width, let's say 300, without the pixels, slides per view, 1.5. There's a mistake here. Oh yeah, it's a comma. You need a comma here. Yeah, obviously we need the colon here. Okay. So now if I go smaller, what you can see is that it has 1.5 slides, meaning that you have the main slide, and then you can already see the ones from the sides. And we can do that with other sizes as well. So let's say 768 pixels. Again, the colon here. What we will do is slides per view 3, and we change the space between to 20. Okay, that looks better. And you can do that with other breakpoints as well. Just for the sake of showing it, let's do here again slides per view 4 and space between, let's make it 30. Oops, 30 without the S, obviously. And you need a comma here too, right? It's these small things, adding the comma and the colon, which makes all the difference. And now you can see it changes sort of the amount of slides that it shows based on the size of the screen or the device. So that way you can very easily define different sizes for, let's say, mobile, tablet, or just a regular screen.